Epstein obviously dovetails to a much broader sort of breakdown going on within MAGA, centered around Nick Fuentes, who is an overt racist and neo-Nazi. And he is another element and factor here that is splitting the Republicans apart at this moment. And he had some pretty interesting comments recently about how he believes that MAGA is dead, and also pointing out some of the hypocrisy of the right and of other MAGA influencers, where they want to draw the line at him, but they are perfectly okay with hateful racist rhetoric when it comes to other groups, ethnicities, religions, etc. Let's take a listen to C2.
After this year, 2025 is the year that MAGA died. This is the year that this hat is no longer controversial. The hat is not edgy. The hat is not provocative. It doesn't even mean anything. This hat is dead. This hat is dead. Now, metaphorically speaking, and this is the future. And let's look at the ledger. On the side of MAGA, you have Lindsey Graham, Ben Shapiro, Marco Rubio, Randy Fine, Mark Levin. Apparently, all of that is MAGA. Together, they support war with Iran, Chinese students, H-1B visas, 300,000 deportations all year. And then on the other side, apparently what is not MAGA, what is kicked out of MAGA, wacky, crazy haters, Republican haters, Democrats, third worldists. You got Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones. You got all these people on the other side in favor of America first, mass deportations, no foreign students, no foreign workers, no war with Iran, no war with Russia in Ukraine. What has become of the movement? It's been inverted, and it is now dead. This coming Monday, and I said, fuck Islam. I said, these Muslims need to go home. Fuck them. They're barbarians. They're third worldists. They like to live in open sewage and bomb crap. You think any conservative would disavow me? Any of them? Any Republican? You think if I was known for saying that, do you think I would have any trouble getting into CPAC or the New York Young Republican Club Gala or the GOP? Of course not, because Laura Loomer has access to the White House and she says stuff like that. Ben Shapiro has access to Trump and he says stuff like that.
I mean, he's got a point, doesn't he,
No, he's
Saagar?
right.
And
yeah, he's right.
Listen, I want people to be totally clear, because Nick Fuentes is trying to whitewash his image right now and is being sanitized with the help of any number of podcast hosts, but Tucker Carlson being one of them. This is a man who says he loves Hitler, thinks Hitler is cool, and denies the Holocaust, and is an avowed racist, hates Jews, but all sorts of other ethnic groups as well. But he's completely correct there at the end when he says, you know what? If I said all the things that I say, if I said the things that Randy Fine says and Lori Loomer says about how Muslims are disgusting and they're savages and they all need to be deported and it's a horror show, it would be no problem. So you are not going to be able to draw the line. Like, if all that hateful shit is fine for all these other groups, you're not going to be able to draw the line when it comes to Jewish people. And he's 100% correct about that. You know, I also think, like, I'm curious, too, your view, though, on his assertion that effectively MAGA is dead. I think that, in a sense, he's correct about that. And the fact that they have completely compromised any sort of moral credibility they could possibly have in order to gatekeep a character who's an overt, like, neo-Nazi, like Nick Fuentes. I mean, these people support a genocide. They're, they are implementing a refugee policy that is whites only. They're doing mass racial profiling of Latinos, including Latino American citizens across the country. They're sending people to CCOT. And you think you're going to have any sort of moral standing to then be like, no, here's where we draw the line? It's ridiculous.
I think that on the Israel issue is where it's the cleanest headshot. And this is also why this entire conversation about it's like, oh, they must disavow. It's like, guys, nobody more embodies no enemies to the right more than the Zionist right. You can say literally anything about dual loyalty for Muslims, about wanting Palestinian children to starve in Gaza, about wanting and having joy, which here's the thing, they say all this shit. They're like, I get joy when I see Palestinian children, being killed in Gaza. One of the people who has been openly going after the Heritage Foundation has been increasingly making fun of Palestinian women and children who are in tents in Gaza, who are being flooded by more recent rains, which obviously is a mass spreader of disease. So you want the moral authority to tone police what is or isn't. I mean, it's like, again, I can't possibly be lectured by the likes of Randy Fine, who said he wants to nuke Gaza. It's like, dude, you are literally openly celebratory of deaths of women and children, and the same standard that you want applied to rhetoric against Jews is ones that you directly use against Muslims, not even really just Muslims, because it's really just anybody who you disagree with, period. They most openly, go after Muslims. So and by the way, then also, they talk about damage and about how hurtful and hateful rhetoric and all that is. Who has the most power? Who has the most power? The people who have openly cheered on the deaths of women and of children, of funding, much of what is going on there, of directing U.S. policy. So it's very obvious that, if you look at actually who's been the most harmed by hurtful rhetoric, it's you. Like, you're the biggest people for mass murder. And yeah, I mean, look, on the MAGA being dead point, we have counted out Trump before, and that's why I don't. I mean, look, back after January 6th, you could have made a good case that people were going to move on. It didn't work, right? He won, and not only just won the nomination, he won the election by popular vote, right? So I'm not ready to just sit here and discount their own political talent, because they've pulled many, many rabbits out of a hat before. Now, whenever it does come to the Israel issue, and specifically with the current fight that is happening right now, this is something where you cannot both sides it. And I think that perhaps is where he is most correct in terms of, it is Rubio, it is Laura Loomer, Mark Levin, the pro-Israel crowd, which have most directly hitched their wagon to Donald Trump. And more directly, they're making it the direct litmus test for 2028. Now, the anti-Israel right, or I guess the pro-America right, is also doing the same thing. Part of the reason that Tucker Fuentes interview happened, I believe, I have no inside information, is genuinely to force, a choice for a lot of people who are in the American right wing to be like, okay, well, what do we find most offensive about what's happening here? And, like you said, look, I mean, God, Nick, he's a very, very smart guy in terms of calibrating a lot of his language now currently to be the most appealing to mass audience, in the hopes that a lot of people may forget. However, for all the people who complain about him, as I have said here before, he literally was working on the Kanye West campaign. He was dead irrelevant and a joke back in 2023. October 7th resurrected his entire image because he had something to criticize, to expose, and to fight against. And that's part of the reason that he is in the prominent position of where he is right now. And that's entirely a creation, I believe, of the Zionist right and of the way that they've handled themselves over the last 2 years. It's one where they correctly see them as a threat, but they are the mirror image in a lot of ways, rhetorically, and to the effect also of destroying MAGA. Israel is destroying MAGA. Israel is destroying the Republican Party. It already destroyed the Democratic Party. It's destroying much of the Republican Party because it's about generational lines, and it's not just about the actions in Gaza. It's fundamentally a question of who do you work for and who do you care about the most. If you care about this foreign nation at the expense of ours, which you can directly say about Islam, but you're not capable of saying it about this, well, you're a hypocrite, and you're the people with all the power. You're directly, it appears, this is the one issue in which you're willing to compromise all of your principles. That's what makes people go crazy. I read that quote from, you may not have seen it, there's a long piece in the New York Times about Tucker Carlson. What he says there is he was like, I was truly shocked to find out that many of the Republicans who I have been friends with and others do not care nearly as much about free speech as they allegedly, pretended to over the last 10 years. I feel that way too. I mean, I actually do feel more galled by a Ben Shapiro or by, a myriad of other right-wing figures the Trump administration to not only run on a position of free speech, to, be against the woke left and to say that this is bad and anti-American, and then to come into office and directly use, anti-free speech measures to shut down dissent again over an issue, of a foreign country. Like, that's why the Israel issue resonates, is because it's the one where people are willing to compromise everything that they've ever said before in order to act seemingly on behalf of this foreign power. And it's what gives the cleanest hit to a Nick Fuentes to anybody else. And so, in my opinion, they have nobody but themselves to blame. Why should we listen to you about tone policing? We can't. I can't deal with it.
I mean, I think it would be ideal if you had two political parties that both were able to gatekeep actual neo-Nazis. Yeah. But when you have, listen, on the Democratic side, why was Israel such a problem for Democratic leadership? It's because it exposed the hypocrisy of the distance between their rhetoric about human rights, right, and these like liberal international humanitarian values and claiming to care about democracy and international law and all these things, and then an active genocide. And it just, the base looked at that and it's like, this is disgusting. Like, we actually do believe in these international human rights values. Like, we actually believe people should have equal rights and we shouldn't support ethno-states and apartheid and genocide. And we cannot understand why you would be such incredible, disgusting, murderous hypocrites when it comes to this. On the right, to go a level deeper even than Israel, MAGA is increasingly centered around Christian nationalism. So it's okay for you to then say, okay, well, the Muslims have to go and the Hindus are disgusting and they have to go. But no, we're going to draw the line and we're going to protect. You can't say anything hateful about Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Nick Fuentes is the logical conclusion of the philosophy that they have centered within the MAGA movement, increasingly centered within the MAGA movement. So when he says MAGA is dead, I think he's absolutely right, because he is part of, he is like the logical end state of MAGA. And the fact that he is critical of them from the right, and you have Trump, who is incredibly weak at this point, who just took this electoral shellacking, who is a lame duck, who is an old man, increasingly looking like an old man, falling asleep in meetings, falling asleep while he's standing up at White House events, who's lost control of his own political party, can't even get them to vote his way on the Epstein files, has to completely 180. Everyone is jockeying for what is going to come after Trump. And so through the fact of his political weakness and the exposing of the ideological fissures, flaws, hypocrisies, and lies of this sort of core MAGA ideology, I think Fuentes is absolutely right. And you can already see, and this is part of what's happening with Marjorie Taylor Greene, part of what's happening with Thomas Massie, part of what's happening with Ted Cruz. You can see everyone starting to jockey, and J.D. Vance obviously starting to jockey for what is going to be next. This administration is already a failure. There's nothing Trump could do at this point to like pull a rabbit out of the hat and totally remake the economy. The economy is is headed south and probably only going to get worse. None of his 50-year mortgage ideas are going to pull it out of the tailspin. They're betting massively on AI technology that's going to replace, millions of workers in their ideal. Like, the whole thing is completely bankrupt and is increasingly exposed as so. So, listen, I've been wrong about Trump before. I thought he would lose to Kamala, so people should take my words with a grain of salt. I've been wrong in the past. There's no doubt about it. But I have never seen this level of weakness in the coalition, this level of genuine sort of like foundational fissures. And I've never seen someone from within the movement be able to go up against Trump and get the better of him. And now we have effectively like multiple people who are able to do that and pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's talk about MAGA, right? Again, about what you were saying. Now, I mean, I think that's a convenient left explanation, because one of the things that they dream about is that anybody who is opposed to immigration is racist, right? I mean, that's literally kind of been the talking point now for over a decade about Trump. I personally did not believe that, and I don't think that a lot of people believe that either who supported Trump in the 2024 election. People wanted less chaos. There are legitimate, non-racial arguments to make about immigration restriction. There are a lot also to make, let's say, even about Israel, anti-Semitism, about nationalism itself. If we talk about the intellectual heirs of American nationalism back to the early days, let's say with the Progressive Party under Theodore Roosevelt, there was an explicit element specifically to fight against know-nothings and the other strain of racialism and anti-Catholicism that was in the right, and instead to make it about the nation centered in and of itself, to include the Irishman, the Scotsman, as long as people were able to forego, their attachments to foreign nations and to buy into a national civic project. Like, you're saying that's what MAGA is all about. I don't believe that. I actually don't believe that that's really what a lot of the people who voted for Trump and believed, America First itself as an ideology itself. Now, I think Fuentes likes MAGA to be this because that's what he wants, right? And part of what Trump has always done is he's been kind of a Rorschach test where you could see civic nationalism if you want. You could also see overt racialism if you want to. Some of the actions of the administration, don't necessarily make the case, that I'm making here. And that's where that becomes the logical endpoint, where when you start to use free speech, to go after people who are criticizing Israel, when you are overtly just not really allowing, ethnocentrism itself to be a primary argument for immigration instead of anything economic or to be to your own benefit, that is where it validates some of the MAGA, that you're talking about, one that I've personally been trying to, go fight against now for 10 years. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I have been successful. I think that movement itself about competence, about civic nationalism, which again, I still believe validated in the 2024 election. A lot of people were actually on board with that vision, and they did win the popular vote. First time a Republican has done it since 2004. That is an extraordinary achievement. All of this is to be said here is that if they want to go down the rabbit hole of people who vote for Mamdani or socialist Muslims, and that Mamdani itself, socialist Muslim, needs to be denaturalized, be deported, then don't be surprised when the other side of that coin is going to be exposed when we got to start talking about dual loyalty and about foreign, about being beholden to foreign ideologies or any of that. You cannot gatekeep in that. The better option is to basically embrace everybody on the terms as Americans and to debate, but that's not what they've chosen to do. And that's also why, that's why if you accept that framing, which many current modern Republicans do, which is to make it about foreign entanglements when it comes to Zoran Mamdani, and not instead about the campaign issue and the campaign-related stuff itself for why a lot of people voted for it, let's say on affordability, then you do go down the ethnic rabbit hole, which is to his direct benefit. That's what he wants more than anything. I mean, it's ironic because he's talking there about if I said this about Muslims. It's like, dude, I'm pretty sure you have said all that about Muslims, number one. But number two, you like
it's not
this.
like he's some lover of Arabs or Muslims.
Yeah, and
right?
you know what? Look, let me also say, I'm no great, fan. I've made plenty of comments here, and I think it's totally legitimate to talk about Islamic migration or any of that. I will talk that all day long as long as what we're trying to strive for is American values and a non-racialized view of the world, okay? That's very different. But what they celebrate openly is this discussion of, what they celebrate openly is this framework explicitly around America must be a, Christian white nation, which a lot of the Islamic stuff kind of basically, tacitly embraces. They just have a Jewish carve-out for it. And he's like, well, no, I don't want that Jewish carve-out too. So then you can't be surprised when this happens, right? So in a lot of ways, you have only yourselves to blame. And this is really where Richard Hanania, I have to give credit where due, his abeliophile defense notwithstanding, is which he docs has recently taken up as a cause. What he says is about the Groyperization of a lot of Republican politics, is if you openly embrace denaturalized, deport type rhetoric about anybody who opposes you, then it's not an accident that some Fuentes literally anti-Jewish is going to be openly embraced within that framework, because that is the end point. And if that's the choice, well, I think it's pretty bad, and I'm out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it it reminds, and I don't remember who said this. It might have been Hanani. I'm not sure, but it reminds in a sense of the rise of Trump, where, people, Fox News or the George W. Bush Republican Party would flirt with rhetoric, but he would come out and say it more directly. And so increasingly, especially in Trump 2.0, with Stephen Miller being such a central figure, who is a blood and soil white nationalist, like wants the ethno state, is quite upfront about that. And that is his ideological project, and it drives him day and night. When you have him in charge, and you have the DHS posting the way they are, and the videos and the social media content that they put out, and the way that they conduct themselves, and the things that they say. And yes, Laura Loomer being a close advisor and describing herself as a proud Islamophobe who is just openly racist. You have embraced a racialist view of the world. That is your view. That is the policy you're implementing. That is a lot of the communications that are coming out. But you aren't going that next step of being quite as overt, or frankly, quite as consistent as Nick Fuentes is. Nick Fuentes says, yes, I am an overt racialist. Yes, I want this country to be for white Christians. That's what we should have. And guess what? Jews are not white Christians. So they're out. So he is taking the more overt, consistent view of the ideological project that they set in motion. Now, I think that my own view is that you're right, Saagar. I don't think that many of the people who voted for Trump, I don't think that they want an overtly like neo-Nazi, outright racist party. I think that there are many people who voted for Trump who are going to be repelled by that. But that is that is what they have set in motion. That is the logical endpoint of the ideology that, especially in Trump 2.0, they have put in place and heavily, heavily flirted with. So that's why I think, when I say I think he's right that MAGA is dead, because Nick Fuentes and others, but Nick Fuentes is sort of forcing a choosing. He's forcing a divide. He's forcing a choosing. Are you going to be this overtly racialist, white nationalist, ethno-state, blood and soil project? Are you going to do that? And are you going to be consistent about it, even when it comes to the Jews? And there aren't going to be any sacred ethnicities or religions or sacred cows. Everybody's on the table. Or are you going to be, some sort of a squish and believe everybody should have equal rights and that we should live together in this sort of like pluralistic democratic project that, has been imperfectly practiced in the US for many years? He is forcing a choosing. And that's why I think when that plus Trump's political weakness and like being a lame dunk and all of that sort of stuff is why I think he fundamentally is correct about MAGA being broken apart and being dead and not meaning anything. And now people are going to have to pick sides of where they are. Picking the Ben Shapiro side of it's fine to hate everybody except the Jews, I don't think that that's going to be a sustainable place to continue to stand.
No, it's not a sustainable place. And that is ultimately what is fracturing all of this. You can't support a literal Jewish ethno-state and overtly to the point where you're willing to sacrifice all of your American principles and then say, no, we shouldn't have an ethno-state here. You're like, come on, okay? I mean, it's just so ridiculous. And this is part of what is broken down a lot. Look, I find it really tragic. I think it's bad, and I think it's really grim because what they don't understand is that their embrace of Israel has led to this embrace now of overt racialism. They also don't understand that for a lot of people, let's say if you're younger, you're 22, and you're just getting into politics. You haven't, Krystal, you and I have been aware of Fuentes and the Groyper phenomenon or whatever for 8 years, right? So we remember a lot of the past. But they don't. They actually have no idea. They don't, they currently see, oh, this is very reasonable. Of course. Oh, calling out Trump. If that's the tack that we believe in, we should fully take it, in this direction. And so I fully understand how disgruntled, and especially people who love degenerate activity and are seething, coping with a variety of vices of which everybody knows that I hate, and you embrace hateful politics, especially also in the age of large unemployment and inability to meet a spouse. You're fully addicted to pornography, phone. You're really in a place where it does not seem society wants to help you. I can always intellectually understand, as I have read many books of previous countries where this has happened, how this can go down that direction. I don't think that that is an embrace of that. I think we can just all simply understand that radical politics are a logical consequence of the current conditions that we live in. Part of the reason why I attack those conditions vehemently. Part of the reason why we talk about AI and many of these other phenomena. But the problem too for the Republicans is they're not really trying to address many of those issues I just described as well. If anything, they're probably making it worse with a lot of the rise of AI. So in a multi kind of factorial way, I always look at who's in power, who is to blame. I think they're the ones to blame. Now, people have agency. If you're going to say overtly racist shit, be openly anti-Semitic, yeah, screw you, okay? Nobody is absolving people who hold those views, but it's also not difficult to see how that it could be a logical endpoint for how you end up in this right now. And, Charlie Kirk saw that coming with a lot of the Israel stuff that they were dealing with over at TPUSA. It's a problem now for the entire, not just Republican Party, that's just a problem for the nation broadly. Because, like you were saying about norms and gatekeeping, if you're willing to blow gatekeeping, institutions, rhetoric, and all of that on behalf of a foreign government for Israel, then you, in my opinion, again, are the person then who opened up the so-called gates to every, crazy person in America. So, because you have no moral authority anymore. You have to restore some sort of moral authority and civic understanding between people so that we can all re-agree kind of on what guardrails and all of that were. That's part of the reason I hate the mainstream media, right? Is because I'm like, listen, I know, independent media isn't some great bastion, but I thought that some of the norms and the things that they find offensive, whatever, are horrible and are bad. But what we're living through is kind of a reformation of that. And we're living with the logical consequence of what I think, again, a lot of these establishment people propped up and they normalized ethno-state worship and sacrificing principles on behalf of a foreign government. Well, where did you think it was going to go? And many people were warned about this too. Zed Jelani in particular has been at the forefront always about how openly embracing and supporting current Israeli government, Israeli policy, the destruction, a lot of the domestic policy, which is overtly on behalf of Israel, not only increasing anti-Semitism, undermining American values, and how ultimately the idea that we should all just be treated equally is kind of directly undermined by a lot of the pro-Israel project. And so when people take that seriously, that type of rhetoric, they will embrace the American kind of end of that. And that's scary for everyone, Jews included, but not just them.
Yeah, indeed. And I want to be clear. I don't think that Fuentes style neo-Nazism is going to succeed as a political project. I don't think it's a majority coalition, but I do think it is succeeding at destroying MAGA. And I think that it, and look, put it on full display. Let people see, what the views are, the hate and the ugliness that is embraced by, people with an avowedly central racialist worldview. And, I think most Americans, I have enough faith in this country that I think most Americans will be repelled and disgusted by, a group of people who, follows a guy who says that he thinks Hitler's great and the Holocaust was faked or exaggerated, and that he's worried about quote unquote organized Jewry and, all the horrific things that he says about every minority group. I think that will be rejected by Americans, but he certainly has caused, like I said, he's caused a choosing within the Republican Party. And it's probably a good segue here to our conversation about Israel and what's going on there.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.